Hi. I'm so pleased to welcome you all here today to the NCCD Conference on Children, Youth, and Families. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you today in this room. Many of you here in this audience come from many, many different systems. We have child welfare, juvenile justice, education, and many more. And it's really my hope that by the end of this week, you will be able to return to work with new ideas, new connections that are both going to motivate and inspire you in the ongoing, continuing work that you do. So I come to this podium today with a background, a professional background, that's really not that dissimilar to many of you. As my first day on the job as a child protective services worker more than 20 years ago, I arrived to find a caseload of more than 28 families who hadn't been seen in over 6 months. I was instructed to go out and say, are the children safe? And also make a decision about whether they needed ongoing services from the department. Anyone here who has worked on the front lines, works on the front lines now, will understand what I mean when I say that there are families, there are kids, and young people that I still carry with me today. I still think about them. There are many families I look back on and wonder, how are they doing? Did I make the right decisions, right? Did my decisions truly serve their best interests? Are they better off because of the intervention that I provided? And I know that for all of us, there are those kids, those families that we wish we had that do-over, right? To apply what we know now, and we would do things differently. In my early years on the front lines, the only guidance that was available to me to help inform my decisions that I was making was a tool that asked my opinion about a number of different domains of family and caregiver functioning. I was asked to rate those items on a scale of 1 to 5 without any definitions. Right? So what I scored as a 2, another worker might score as a 1 or a 3. And then at the end of that assessment, I was asked to make some decision about whether this family was low, medium, or high risk, completely unrelated to the scoring of the items. So I'd like to ask you all in the room to imagine for just a minute that you are a parent in one of those families, right? How comfortable are you with that methodology? How confident are you that the person knocking on your door that day is going to see you in the way that you want to be seen? How certain do you feel that unconscious or even explicit bias about class, race, sexual orientation, culture are going to play into this stranger's decisions and assessments about your family, right? But back then, as careful as I was about my assessments and as consistent as I tried to be, I still felt like I was often making a best guess. And that another worker, or even myself on a different day, might make a different decision. I often thought to myself, surely there must be a better way to make decisions when the stakes are so high. See, it wasn't until I received a chance invitation to attend a presentation on a research-based approach to assessing risk of harm in child welfare. This is called structured decision-making. And it wasn't until that moment that I really, truly understood the complexities of decision-making in human services. So not only did I now have a much better understanding of what goes into a decision-making process, but I had now information to help me navigate all those issues. Having this guidance gave me a new degree of confidence that as a child protection professional, I was going to be able to make empirically based decisions amidst the magnitude and often conflicting pieces of information that we hear about families and that we learn about families in the course of our engagement with them. And then when I became a child protective services supervisor, understanding the research basis behind the calculation of risk of future harm enabled me to support my staff in ways that I was not able to before. SDM gave us a useful structure for case supervision with consistent, meaningful touch points that provide contextual information about child safety and service provision. And a few years after that, I learned just how critical STM was at the state policy level. Right? We introduced data-driven approaches and methods to making staffing and resource allocation decisions in ways that were more equitable and justifiable. I believe in STM. The reason I stand here today talking about it isn't because I work at NCCD. It's actually the other way around. I work at NCCD because the values of the system, equity, research, consistency, are also my values, and the values that I believe our social service and justice systems have to live by. Our systems are accountable in the most important ways: the lives of children, young people, and families. And we owe it to them to use approaches that are tested and proven. STM isn't just a set of reliable and useful tools. It's actually so much bigger than that. It's a philosophical and ethical orientation to keeping children and communities safe and supported. In child protection and juvenile justice, we have a responsibility to balance civil liberties and government intervention. People have a constitutional right to privacy. Families have a right to raise their children the way they see fit. But sometimes governments need to intervene to protect children and keep people safe. But there are steep costs if they overreach. They may interfere with our freedoms, put families through hardships, or harm young people in the name of helping them, widening the net, bringing more people into the system who would be better served in their communities. These adversities fall disproportionately on people of color, people in poverty, people who are othered by society in a variety of ways. There's also a danger of not intervening enough because we miss critical opportunities for prevention and keeping people safe. So when we ask this urgent question, who and when to intervene, STM answers. It's valid and tested with a proven track record. It's consistent, helping to reduce the role of bias. And it's transparent, not a black box that makes automated decisions about people's lives. You know just how transformative STM can be. Over the next few days, we're going to hear about some of the incredible things that it's helped people accomplish. For example, the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice has reduced the number of young people in confinement and has reduced out-of-home placements by 20%, with no apparent uptick in juvenile crime. It's quite an accomplishment. San Diego Child Welfare has seen improvement in a number of categories, including fewer children entering into foster care, better placement stability, and since implementing STM in 2006, a 52% reduction in the number of children in foster care. So shout out to San Diego. Yeah. At NCCD, we're always working to make STM even more powerful. Our improvements, which are carefully tested, rest upon a foundation of over 2 decades of agencies using the STM system and over 100 years of working to protect children. As a mission-driven nonprofit, we approach these efforts with reverence for the families whose lives will ultimately benefit from our work. We strongly believe that there is so much at stake to proceed with anything but ethics, respect, and above all, a commitment to using evidence to shape the way our systems treat people. You've all seen reforms and initiatives that have been undertaken with the best of intentions and then laid aside as we get into the hectic pace of the work that we have to do every day. Worse, you have seen attempts at improvement that have failed because they were new but not better. The work you do with children and their families is complicated, and from the inside you know that it's very difficult for someone from the outside of the system to understand what it is that you do and the lengths that you go to do it. It's easy enough for someone on the outside to pick up a newspaper or hear a radio broadcast and make judgments about what you should be doing. There must be external accountability to the communities that we serve. These communities do have a right to ask questions, and they deserve to get answers about the systems that exist to serve them. But accurate answers aren't always the easy answers. Sometimes they lead to more work. Sometimes they lead to even harder questions that we have to work through. We should use these opportunities to reflect and renew our dedication to what we know to be effective and meaningful. There are no quick fixes, no shortcuts in this challenging work. However, research has shown time and time again that decision-making tools, when paired with clinical judgment, improve the outcomes for families. So you have research, we have clinical skills. Both of them matter. And it's the union of these two things that we believe offers the field the best that we can give them. It's also imperative that these two aspects of the work be implemented and guided by our values around equity, transparency, and the protection of civil liberties. So NCCD's goals are to help you, whether you are an administrator, an advocate, or in some other role in these fields, to develop and sustain data-driven cultures of practice, to promote equitable and just treatment of people who come into contact with your systems, and to influence effective policy and practice. You all play a role in helping us achieve these goals, and we are committed to helping you achieve yours. I want to thank you for choosing this very, very difficult and important work of helping children, young people, and families. We want this conference to be a resource to you today, now, and as you move forward. We're proud of the rich selection of workshops that will be presented by 121 child welfare and juvenile justice professionals from the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Taiwan. We also have attendees from as far as Singapore and Iceland, so thank you all for making the long journey and the trip to be here today. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I want to thank our advisory committee, our conference planning team, and NCCD's board of directors. I also want to thank our generous sponsors, the California Endowment, the North American Resource Center on Child Welfare, Casey Family Programs, and Audubon. We are grateful for your ongoing support. And now, it is my privilege to introduce you to Dr. William Siebel, President and CEO of Casey Family Programs. Casey Family Programs, it's a celebrity in our midst. Casey Family Programs is the nation's largest operating foundation focused on safely reducing and eventually ending the need for foster care. Dr. Bell has served as Casey's president and CEO for over 10 years. He has more than 35 years of experience in the human services field. Prior to joining Casey, Dr. Bell was commissioner of the New York City's Administration for Children's Services and also served as deputy commissioner of New York City's Division of Child Protection. The honors and awards that Dr. Bell has received over the years and his volunteer leadership roles are numerous. He is a tireless advocate for children, and I am honored to call him a friend. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bell.
Thank you. Good morning. You sound tired. Good morning. All right, that's a lot better. You know, so many of you here I've had the pleasure of meeting before, and some of you I have not. But to each of you, I say good morning. But I also want to encourage you to never stop wrestling with yourself. Never stop wrestling with the question of, am I where I need to be? And am I who I need to be in order to benefit others. It is easy, as so many times happens in this world, we get caught up in, am I where I need to be to benefit myself? I always thought that I would be at this point by this time in my life, and I'm not there, and so therefore, sometimes we feel that we are a failure. But I would suggest to you that the greatest success in life is not what we are able to achieve for ourselves. The greatest success in life is what we're able to do for others. If I can help somebody as I travel along, then my living is not in vain. I am thrilled to be here with you this morning as you focus on creating solutions. But I am pained to be here with you this morning because our solutions will come too late for too many of our children. I don't know if you were listening to the music that was playing around you. Some of you, I could see you moving, so I know you were listening. But the last song, I think, was Living in America. What's that like from where you sit? And what's that like from where the kids and families that you work with sit? The song before that, I think, was I Love You. This old heart of mine has been broken 1,000 times. Anybody in this room hasn't heard somebody say in the last 3 days to you, I love you? Imagine some of the children and the parents that we serve who haven't heard that in 3 years. This old heart of mine been broke 1,000 times. Over the past few years, no matter how I've tried, I've found it very hard to stop the voices that I hear crying out in my head. They're like voices crying out in the wilderness of the isolation that far too many of our young people are growing up with, that far too many of the families that we deal with and the communities that we deal with are facing. The isolation of zip codes where nobody wants to go. The isolation of neighborhoods where not even a for-profit supermarket is willing to take a $1 million city contribution in order to start a supermarket in that neighborhood. And I've visited many such neighborhoods where the city government was saying, here is $1 million if you will put a supermarket in this neighborhood. And they've said no. But yet we are here in the land of the free, the home of the brave, this place where we are told that this nation is the keeper of that dream that we all allegedly have an opportunity to achieve. In 1903, a plaque was placed inside the lower pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, the statue of freedom and hope. I don't think anybody in this room was around in 1903, but I'm sure you've read some things about how the citizens of this United States of America were being treated in 1903. Or you've read something about how the native people of this land were being treated in 1903. But yet in 1903, Kathy, when you talk about contradictions, in 1903, a plaque was placed inside of one of our most recognizable monuments. And that plaque reads in part, give me, I had to take my glasses off because I'm at that age. I'm a man of a certain age now. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuge of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Think about that. Give me your homeless. I got a golden door and a lamp. I'm welcoming all of them to come and take refuge within me. Anybody here from Seattle? What do you see when you're coming off of I-90, coming out to 4th, just to your left as you're coming around the curve before you get to the stadiums? Tents. Tents. I knew they were here because they're from Casey. But yet, even with all of this invitation, I keep hearing the voices of the children of this nation crying out. And they're saying, I'm here. I'm out here in these streets. And these streets done raised me. The streets of Chicago, the streets of the Lakota Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, the streets of LA, the streets of Compton, the streets of Anaheim. When we think Anaheim, we think Disney, but there is a part of Anaheim that is not an amusement park, where children are crying out. And just think about the city and the streets that I'm talking about are there as well. It is a cry that is asking us to consider the possibility that the programs that we've created, no matter how well intended they may have been, they just may not be enough to dismantle this historical institution that has been stealing our children's minds and their futures and their hope for generations. It is a cry that is calling out to each one of us in this room today. It is a cry that is calling out to all of the good people of this great nation. Because you see, I've heard that it's not the actions of the bad people that are destroying us. It is the lack of action from the good people that leaves us hopeless. Let me say that again. Because we've gotten to a place where we like to point out bad people. It is not the actions of the bad people that is destroying us. It is the lack of action of the good people that leave us hopeless. When we talk about police shootings, it is not the action of the bad people that are destroying us. It is the lack of action of the good people that leave us hopeless. When we talk about black boys shooting other black boys, when we talk about Latino boys shooting other Latino boys, when we talk about Asian boys shooting other Asian boys, when we talk about Japanese boys shooting other Japanese boys, when we talk about Native American boys shooting other Native American boys, it is not the action of the bad people that is destroying us. It is the lack of action from the good people that leave us hopeless. Our children are crying out. Our children in juvenile justice, our children in foster care, our children in the 2,000 schools in this nation that we know them so well, we have called them the dropout factories. And when we can name what something is, we have an obligation to do something about it. The children who are in the hospitals right now because they were victims of the drive-by shootings in their neighborhoods last night, they're crying out to us. Our children who are sitting in their rooms right now, all across this country, in these same neighborhoods, these same communities, our children who are sitting there contemplating whether this day is the day that they end it all. You see, on average, every 24 hours in this great nation, this wonderful place that we call home, 12 young people under the age of 25 take their own life through suicide. 12, every 24 hours on average. Making a statement that one more day in this place is just not an option for me.
not yet 25, many of them teenagers. I can't do this anymore. Somebody see me. And the challenge is that there are so many other children who are waiting in the pipeline to walk that same pathway, unless we are willing to answer their question. And the question that they're asking us is, are we serious this time? Are we serious enough to move beyond focusing on the symptoms of what's happening in their lives and move to the place of beginning to call out and address the root causes of those symptoms that are staring us in the face? Because I don't think that we are ignorant to the root causes. Now, some people see ignorant as a bad word. I just see it as a lack of knowledge, lack of awareness. I don't think that we are unaware of the challenges that are causing these symptoms. Are we serious enough to begin to change the streets that are raising our children? Are we serious enough to even acknowledge that these issues didn't begin with Sanford, Florida? These issues didn't begin with Ferguson, Missouri. These issues didn't begin with Baltimore, Maryland. These issues didn't begin with Baton Rouge, Louisiana. These issues didn't begin when the police officers were shot in Dallas, Texas. These issues didn't begin. We've been here before. How many of you lived in this great nation in the 1950s? I know some of you don't want to raise your hand, but I can look at you and tell you were there. How many of you were here in the 60s? How many of you were here in the 70s? How many of you were here in the 80s? And I know you were here in the 90s. We've been here before. And our children's voices are crying out. And some can only cry from that place of eternal pain that is the life that they've only known. Some people, Langston Hughes asked, what happens to a dream deferred? I ask, what happens to the dreamer who is so caught up with existing and surviving that they don't have the opportunity to dream? Those great poets, Ja Rule and Mary J. Blige, wrote a song about this. And it's called These Streets Done Raised Me. These streets done raised me. Take my glasses off again. These streets done raised me. Don't turn me off because I'm still your child. This world done changed me. I'm out here, standing here, looking in the mirror, trying to convince myself that my life is getting better. But I know the outcome. Nobody loves me. Somebody please pray for me before I die on these streets. These streets done raised me. This world done changed me. This world made me what I am, a 26-year-old kid with 2 kids. There ain't nothing you can do about us. Nobody loves me. Mary, please pray for me before I die in these streets. Are we serious this time? Are we serious enough to change the streets that are stealing our children's future in their minds? And are we serious enough to at least begin to acknowledge that it is not possible for one single government program alone to change this? It is not possible for one single program of any sort to change this. And it is not possible for one single foundation, a nonprofit alone, to change this. We can't change the streets by ourselves. And I know that the funding streams have challenged us to tell everybody, I can do it. Give me your money and I will prove to you that I can do it. I will never be able to do it. And until I become we, and we stop fighting for the crumbs that this country spends on social programming. And I mean that, crumbs. When you look at our GDP, when you look at what we spend when we want to spend, when you look at how in the drop of a dime we have spent billions of dollars in wars that will not end, the crumbs that we spend on social programs and we make people jump through hoops to try and get them, as long as we continue to act as though we can save vulnerable children from their broken parents in undeserving communities, when we can save those children without engaging the families and the communities, as long as we keep pretending that that is true, our kids will keep crying. We must change our mindset. First pathway to creating solutions. We must begin to engage in solving the challenges and addressing the issues and challenges that are affecting our kids in the context of the issues and challenges that are affecting their families. And we must engage and address and solving the issues that are affecting their families in the context of the issues that are affecting their communities. There are communities in this nation where you cannot buy a piece of fresh fruit, but you can get a bottle of liquor with food stamps. You cannot buy a piece of fresh broccoli, but you can get a 20-piece, I'm sorry, McDonald's, you can get a 20-piece for $4.99. When we decide that you can't get a bank loan, hear me somebody, but you can get a payday loan at 300% interest. There was a time when they called that loan sharking. I'm about to get upset, so bear with me. But I'm convinced that the greatest challenge that's facing America today is not the challenge of who's going to win the election on November 8th, or even the challenge of who won the debate last night. That's not the greatest challenge facing us. The greatest challenge facing America today is the growing sense of hopelessness that we see in just about 7,000 zip codes across this nation. You see, there are approximately 33,000 residential zip codes in the United States of America. And just 20%, or about 6,600 of those residential zip codes, contain 80% of the 16 million children who are living in poverty in this country. 20%. 6,600 zip codes. And because they're zip codes, we know where they are. We can find them. We know most of these children by name. They're in schools. They're in jails. They're in hospitals. They're in the public assistance register. We know them. They're on the child abuse register. We know them. They're in juvenile justice. We know them. These 6,600 zip codes also contain 76% of the 28.5 million adults who are 25 years or older, whose highest level of education is less than a GED. Help me. 28.5 million adults, 25 years or older, whose highest level of education attainment is less than a GED in this great nation of ours. And it would stand to reason that you have seen many of these children and these families in your work. And we all know these zip codes. The question is, are we serious this time? I'd ask you to close your eyes for a moment. Think about your city. And tell me if you can't see the streets in your city where these kids are. Some of them may be streets that you don't really want to walk down. But if you're a CPS worker, if you're in juvenile justice, you don't have any choice. These streets exist in our cities, and we know them. You know, I kind of feel like I should pause for a minute right here, because I just want you to know that while I know those things that I just talked about, I also know that we've made considerable progress over the course of time. I know that at one point there were over 100,000 children in juvenile justice facilities, and that number has been reduced dramatically. I know that at one point there were over 550,000 children in foster care in this country, and right before this opioid crisis came about, that number had dropped below 400,000. I know that. I know about the great work that Kathy and her team at NCCD are doing. And I know the great work that you guys are doing. I know what we've gained from our ACEs research and the programs that we're developing out of it. I know this. I know that what we've gained from study of brain science and what we've gained from the trauma-informed practices that we're putting in place. And so I know that we are changing things. And I even know that some of you and many of our partners around this country are on a crusade to end juvenile incarceration. And I applaud you from the depths of my heart for trying to end that atrocity. But I don't want anyone to leave here depressed because you thought that I was painting a gloom and doom future for our world. And the way you clapped when I was introduced, you might think a little bit about the words that I say. And so I just want to make sure that you hear me say that I hope that what you leave here with when you go back to your daily work is a renewed commitment to change. I hope that you don't go back thinking, oh, Dr. Bell said it's just going to hell in a handbasket and I better change my career before it gets here. No, that's not what I want you to take with you. I hope that you take back with you a renewed perspective and a renewed vision that you can, that we can, and that this country can, and it must find a way to create better pathways to hope for all of our children, so that they can see that lamp that is lit and lifted by the golden door. I hope that you go back with a renewed sense of the sacrifices that will be required if we are ever going to make it possible for families and their children to realize the citizenship rights, indeed the birthrights, that we all should have as citizens of this nation, that our Constitution says are endowed to us. They're ours, in theory. Equal justice and equal protection under the law. Throughout his life and during the 1950s and 60s, Dr. Martin Luther King constantly reminded us that we cannot stop what we are trying to do. We are on a movement to change the way this nation treats its people. We're engaged in a movement to say we can't keep doing this way. And we cannot stop what we are doing until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And let me take a moment to talk to you a bit about justice and righteousness in the context of where we are and who we are today. You see, justice is conditioned on the laws that exist and the way in which those laws are practiced and applied and enforced for each individual, each group of individuals, and each community. And sometimes that's unequal. Righteousness is conditioned on what each of us as people believe about other people. Righteousness is conditioned on the content and the capacity for equality in the human heart. Our ability as an individual to possess a heart governed by righteousness will overwhelmingly be determined by our willingness to grant others equal justice, the equal protection, the equal opportunity, and the equal access that the law says is already theirs. Our capacity to behave righteously and justly towards others is governed by what we see when we look at somebody. Justice defines and prescribes the law the way that I should be treated, the way that the opportunities should be presented to me, and the access that I should have to opportunity in this country, and how I should be treated if I violate the law. And equal justice speaks to the need and the expectation that those things would be applied to me, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion, regardless of gender, regardless of the fact that I may be a member of the LGBT community, regardless of the fact that I may have been previously incarcerated, regardless of the fact that I may have a disability, and regardless of the fact that I may have a mental illness. Justice and equal protection of the law has been said, it belongs to me. I'm entitled to it. But I want you to wrestle with something. What you see when you look at me has more to do with how you perceive me, how you respond to my needs, and how you treat me than anything I could ever do or say. What you see when you look at me. Anybody in this room, you ever encountered somebody for the first time? You've never seen that person before. You walk in, no words are spoken. You don't speak to them, they haven't spoken to you. And before the encounter begins, you can recognize a distinct change in their facial expressions and their body language. Anybody other than me? I know some of y'all don't want to tell the truth. I know it. But it's real. You ever have this thing where you don't know that person, but you look at them and you say, they don't like me. You don't have any words or history, but there's something that rises up in your gut that says, they don't like me and they don't know me. What you see when you look at me has more to do with how you perceive me and how you treat me than anything I could ever do or say. Because what you see when you look at me will cause you to take me to a Burger King meal, even though you just arrested me for killing 9 people in a church and fleeing the scene. What you see when you look at me will cause you to shoot me within seconds of showing up on the scene where I am, even though I'm a 12-year-old boy with a toy gun. What you see when you look at me will cause you to shoot and wound me so that I can be arrested, even though you know I just shot at you. And even though you know that I just planted bombs in New York and New Jersey. But I get to go to jail. While others who have no evidence whatsoever that they've committed a crime. Others who have no evidence that they have done anything to threaten you get shot down on the spot. What you see when you look at me what do you see when you look at the faces of the vulnerable children in America? What do you see when you look at yourself? And I tell you that you're the last best chance that many of those children will ever have of getting equal protection under the law. What do you see when you look at yourself as the one who could be the catalyst for changing some of these contradictions that currently exist in our policy statements, in our policy practice? We don't always do what we say. What do you see? And what you see about yourself may be the key to the answer to the question of what is America going to do for the more than 700 children who 24 hours from now will be placed in foster care. What you see when you look at yourself may be key to the answer to the question, what is America going to do with the more than 2,000 children who by 24 hours from now will have been confirmed as victims of child abuse and neglect in this country? What you see when you look at yourself may have it hold the answer to the question of what is America going to say and do about the more than 7 million children who woke up this morning in this great nation living in a household where their family was trying to survive off of less than $8 a day per family member. I'm looking at these Starbucks cups on these tables. $8 a day per family member. If you drink 2 venti Americanos a day, as I have been known to do at times, depending on whether you're in an airport, because they get jacked up there, or in the counter in Seattle, you may spend more than $8 just on your coffee. What you see when you look at yourself may help hold the key to what is America going to do for the more than 50,000 juveniles who woke up this morning in a juvenile corrections facility. I'm sure that most of you have heard this story about the question of what would you do if you were driving alongside a stream and you looked at the stream and you saw babies floating down the stream, and the question is, would you go and pull the babies out of the stream, or would you go further upstream to try to find out what or who was causing these babies to be placed in the stream in the first place? And we know, obviously, both of these things need to happen. We need to pull the babies out of the water, as many of us we can, because if it's just you, you can't get every baby. And if it's 2 of you, you can get more babies, but maybe not twice as many, because the both of you won't necessarily be working at the same pace. And so we got to get the babies out of the water, but we also need to go upstream to try and eliminate the source. The question is, when you look at yourself, do you see somebody who is better suited for pulling the babies out of the water? Or do you see somebody who is ready to go upstream? And that's a question that you can answer, and only you can answer for yourself. Are you better suited to spend the rest of your career pulling babies out of the water? Or is it time to go upstream and eliminate the source? Because when you go upstream to eliminate the source, you are going to challenge the status quo. When you go upstream and eliminate the source, you are no longer going to be able to say it's just in the job description. Because this is not in the job description, this is in your heart. In 1901, Illinois created the first juvenile court. And Judge Julian Mack, who was the founder of that court, said these words: "The child who must be brought into court should, of course, be made to know that he is face to face with the power of the state, but he should at the same time and more emphatically be made to feel that he is the object of its care and its solicitude. The ordinary trappings of the courtroom are out of place in such settings, in such hearings." And Judge went on to say, and he described how the judge should not sit on the bench looking down at the child, but rather the judge should be sitting next to the child in the event that the child at some point would need an embrace. When was the last time you were in a juvenile court proceeding? What happened to that vision? When you are willing to go upstream, you are fighting to change the streets and to change the way we conceptualize what's going on in the streets. And I want to leave with you a couple of things that I would suggest we need to do. Because you got to be ready to take action if you're going to eliminate, I almost said eliminate the threat, but that's a different mindset of my brain. I'm going to take that one out. If you're going to eliminate the source. And I won't go into depth because my time is growing short, and I know you have much to do over the remainder of this conference. But we need political will and public will to sustain anything that we're going to do. I'm from New York City, Child Welfare Agency, and that agency has changed many times over. And at one point, there were 50,000 children in foster care in New York City. Today, there's under 10,000. At one point, we were placing 13,000 new children a year in New York City, and today that number is less than 3,000 new kids a year. But now they're dealing with another child fatality. And the old conversation has come out again. This system is beleaguered. This system is broken. How could the commissioner be asleep at the watch when this child dies? But I'm yet to hear, how could the police commissioner be asleep at the watch when that child was killed? We've got to sustain political and public will. We've got to create integrated government response systems. I long for the day when families don't have to go through this door for this need, and this door for that need, and this door for that need, and this door for that need, and then when they get through this door, they get referred back to the first door for follow-up services. I long for the day when we can integrate our conversation as though we are actually dealing with families. One that I am focused on is, how do we get to a place where we can integrate the funding streams for how we pay for things, and with the investments that philanthropy makes, and stop having people jump through hoops to get that money, and investments that businesses make, and stop having people jump through hoops to get that money? When will we get to the place where we can integrate those things so that we can buy the outcomes that we're looking for? As long as the majority of our spending in juvenile justice goes to pay for incarceration, as long as the majority of our spending in child welfare goes to pay for keeping kids in foster care, we're going to keep getting the same results. You do the same thing, you get the same results. You do the same thing again, you get the same results. If we want change, then we must buy change. Another thing, we must end this practice of zero tolerance in schools, in our public programs, in our communities. Zero tolerance and equal justice under the law cannot coexist. It cannot. And as long as we think that we can, we will continue to deceive ourselves. We must move towards greater utilization of restorative justice and transformative justice strategies in our work. And we must restore true rehabilitation to our criminal justice system. It's gone. Rehabilitation and education have been effectively removed and replaced by gang violence, sexual assault, guards colluding with people who are incarcerated. And in many instances, it looks just like the streets that we're talking about. And then finally, if we want bold change, then we must be willing to set bold goals, make bold proclamations, and take bold actions. And I'll ask you something. And to do that, we must make a bold change in our belief system and our ability to believe what is possible. I'll ask you a few questions. Do you believe that it is possible to end sexual assault in juvenile corrections? Do you believe that it is possible to have a child welfare system where no other child will become an adult while living in a temporary foster care placement? Do you believe that we can abolish the use of for-profit facilities in juvenile justice and criminal justice? Do you believe that it is possible to change our intervention strategies from a child-centered, individual-centered intervention strategy to a family and community-centered intervention strategy where we focus on addressing family readiness, family education, family economic needs, family housing stability, family-centered justice, family health, mental health needs, and other family and community-centered approaches? If we want bold change, we must be willing to take bold actions. Do you believe that we can end all juvenile incarceration in these United States of America?
when I was a child growing up in Mississippi in the, I almost said the 50s and you were going to laugh at me, but I was born in the 50s. In the 60s, we had to supplement our food supply through a government program called Commodities. Some of you may know about that good cheese. But when I became an adult, I realized that commodities was also an asset category, an asset class that is traded on the stock market. And so now I have to ask myself, what does it say about a nation when it reduces its children, vulnerable children, and some of their parents to a commodity that gets traded on the stock market? Right now, 19 of our states, and this is based on 2013 ODJJP data, 19 of our states house more than 40% of their juvenile offenders in for-profit facilities. 10 states house more than 50% or more of their juvenile offenders in for-profit facilities. Florida, 74%. Iowa, 65%. Pennsylvania, 73%. Commodities. The United States of America has become the beacon of hope for so many around this world. We have people going through all kinds of things to get here because they look at us and they see opportunities. They look at us and they see hope. When will we become that hope for our own children? When will we become the place where every child born here will know that dream? When? I urge you to decide. Do you pull babies out of the water for the rest of your life? Or do you go upstream and eliminate the source? And those of us who believe cannot rest until justice flows like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Thank you for sharing this morning with me, and God bless you all.